Take yourself back in time and imagine a stormy day, a gray, cloud-covered sky above, the roiling, angry tempest of the sea below you. The old, rickety wooden boat you cling to creaks with the roll of each wave. But the old girl has served you well thus far. You sailed out here in the Sea of Marmara, not even that far from shore, to find fish to bring back to the busy port of Constantinople to the north, where you will join the noisy throng of merchants at the market to sell your catch. Maybe you can get enough for a better ship after a few more good hauls, or better yet, score big with some of those elusive sea snails used for making the famous Tyrian purple for the royals in Emperor Justinian's court. You have heard among other sailors, however, tales of a great beast prowling the waters further out, but dismissed it as mere legend. Besides, you are a Roman after all. This little sea, not too much larger than a big lake, has long been tamed and is yours. As the storm abates and the din of thunder fades, you calm down and ready your nets in anticipation of the next catch. You see instead a large shadowy mass move through the water below, but shrug it off as your imagination, a mere trick of the light in your exhausted state. You throw out some bait and get ready, but now you feel your boat heave with a great current beneath you. The sea is otherwise still, though. As you look around, you then see it, breaking out of the surface with a plume of salty water sprayed to announce its coming. This is the beast that the others warned you of, Porphyrios. As it emerges more fully from the waves, you only now notice its massive extent. The eyes regard you with a strange look, and you see the dark, almost purple color of the beast's skin. It is certainly awe-inspiring. The others on your boat begin to clamor in a mix of fear and anger, and start to hurl things at the beast. Fools! It will only anger it. You then see the whale dive down, and come leaping with a gigantic splash out of the water toward your little boat. It chomps down and shatters it, also taking one of your companions with you, bits of debris flying all around and blood visible in the water. You desperately try to cling to a piece of flotsam and swim away, but it is too late. The monster Porphyrios has come to take another victim. Could this be a test from the Almighty? Perhaps like the prophet Jonah of old in the Bible? No. You pray to the Lord to protect you, but soon accept your fate and surrender to the awe-inspiring beast as the darkness of its great maw closes around you, hoping your life was virtuous enough to ensure passage to the next life in heaven.
Welcome to another podcast, Andre and Charlie.
So this is going to be a bit of a different topic because we're talking about an animal of all things.
Porphyrios the whale.
Porphyrios, the giant whale, which terrorized
Byzantium.
Byzantium, or Constantinople as known at the time. For about 50 years, this whale was stuck in the the Sea of Marmara and like the Dardanelles and the Bosporus.
Yep.
It swam up there, and then
From the Aegean, right?
Yeah, from the Aegean, but because there's a lot of currents and rough, tides and storms, it kind of got stuck in that area. It couldn't go back.
Because there was low oxygen levels in the Black Sea.
In the Black Sea, to the north had low oxygen levels, so it didn't want to go there.
Right.
But, eventually that was how it met its demise, eventually when it was beached, but...
And then a lot of people went over there and hacked it up, right?
Yeah,
it's very interesting.
But this thing was, it was named Porphyrios because, there's a lot of theories, but supposedly, it's because of its purple color of some kind, because porphyry comes from the Greek word for purple, but it could have also been like a mark of reverence or respect. And that,
it was
like,
the imperial royal color.
Yeah, exactly. Like Porphyrogenitus is like, born in the purple. So,
but another theory is that it was named after a charioteer that existed at that time named Porphyrios.
Porphyrios, yeah.
That's also mentioned in Procopius's The Secret History, who also discusses the whale and talks about its dimensions, and that's how we can kind of guess what the species is. It's either an orca or a sperm whale, a large orca or a sperm whale, right?
Yeah, most likely. Yeah, they don't know exactly, but yeah.
Because of the time period in antiquity and medieval Europe, not a lot was known about whales.
Yeah, they're just seen as monsters of
the sea.
Kind of, like on those old maps, they had like the whales on the maps, along with like the here-be dragons
like that.
Yeah.
And even in the Bible, you hear about these sea creatures that are frightening and scary. You can imagine the ancient mind seeing these things would be so frightened and perturbed by them, and it was like a great danger for seafaring travelers.
But of course, they also had like a sense of respect for it too.
Yes.
So it is pretty impressive how like this animal is able to like affect things for so long that it was like it had a name and it was known.
Yeah, it lasted for like 50 years.
Yeah, right? And it probably disrupted a lot of commerce and trade and things like that. So, and fishing, of course.
The way I found out about this is I was reading Moby-Dick, and Moby-Dick, also titled The Whale, is about this topic of whales, and it mentions how there was this obsession with a whale for 50 years in Constantinople. But you said there was another source as well about the history of Rome, right, that mentions this?
Yeah, it was mentioned in various other sources. I mean, it was mentioned, so Robert Graves, the author of I, Claudius, which is a work of historical fiction that was actually excellent, I recommend. He also wrote a lesser-known story called Count Belisarius, about the favorite general of Justinian at the time. He was, in his story anyway, not in reality, he was sent to go hunt a whale and slay it, but despite all his efforts, he was not able to at this meant. But Belisarius at the time was being like sent everywhere and to do all the work for the emperor, but he was the guy, that got to get it done. But he couldn't take this whale down, apparently.
Right. But it's funny how later historians reinterpret it, thinking like he did do it.
He actually did it,
simply because he was given this command to do it, to take it down.
Yeah, and then so Procopius, as we mentioned in our other podcast, he was a topic of that very centrally because he wrote the Secret History about our boy Justinian. Obviously, he sang all his praises to him in public and was like a close ally on the surface, but in reality kind of disapproved of him and his wife Theodora. Kind of.
But it gives us a really good insight into what people talked about, what people thought. It's interesting to wonder how many secret histories we've lost, like Julius Caesar or Cleopatra or Charlemagne's secret history. Of course, Donna Tartt's 1992 book, The Secret History, is named after Procopius's book. It's very interesting to consider all these different dynamics.
I mean, there's the whole idea of like the victor's right, the history, but Justinian was, by all accounts, a victor overall. I mean, you can argue that he might have done more harm than good long term, but
he held off the Persians. He had the war in Italy where Belisarius was fighting, but he also wrote the Code of Justinian,
which is a major work that would influence future legal codes. But I mean, and Procopius even like Belisarius, he saw him as a more of a naive kind of guy, like a good loyal servant of the state, but
Procopius didn't really say a lot of bad things about him.
He didn't.
Belisarius did his job,
for the most part. But if he was an unfortunate guy, and a lot of people took advantage of him.
But he stayed loyal to the ideals, I guess, that he held set forth.
But
returning back to the whale,
though,
the way I found out, or was re-brought back to my memory, is recently I was reading this book on Shakespeare, and it was talking about Shakespeare's nautical knowledge and the fascination of the nautical themes in Shakespeare's time. And apparently, a whale got stuck in the River Thames on London Bridge at that time, and apparently it wasn't as destructive as Porphyrios that we're talking about, but it was a big deal, and a lot of people came to see it. And even in modern times, there's been whales who got stuck in the Thames, and it was like a big conservation effort. Back in the day, I think people wanted to kill the whale, even in
like they saw it as like a beast, and
But of course, nowadays it's a conservation. People
Yeah.
want to protect the whales and endangered species.
Yeah. And of course, Moby-Dick. Yeah, it's an example of a story of man versus beast, but it also tells us more about like the psyche of the man and the obsession of the hunt.
Yes.
And
Ahab is obsessed with it. Yeah.
I'm sure that does parallel what happened to this whale back in the 6th century.
Yeah. They're obsessed with this whale and how to catch it. It's not just an economic idea. It's like the zeitgeist of the time.
Yeah.
What does it say about the human condition? And maybe even the human condition back then in Constantinople. I mean, it was probably on everyone's, or at least on the back of their mind.
Among other things, they're kind of dealing with a lot back then. But so like this is also kind of mentioned interestingly in the history of the fall and decline of the Roman Empire by Edward Gibbon in the late 18th century. It was one of the most comprehensive and earliest detailed history of Rome's in the sort of modern era. He mentioned the whale there. Obviously, he wasn't as big of a fan of the Byzantine portion of Roman history because he thought Christianity kind of led to some changes and a focus on more.
Yes. I mean, that's a central thesis that people extrapolate from this book, is that basically people lost interest in civic virtues and became too obsessed with the non-material world through Christianity.
Heaven,
like St. Augustine's the city of God and the city of the world. And people were just too out of this world, and not paying attention to these affairs. And of course, it's always interesting to try to hypothesize what was the fall of the Roman Empire. You had just joked with me earlier that maybe it was this whale.
Yeah, I mean, who knows how much this whale contributed to the decline of the Byzantine Empire. I mean, like I said, a lot of stuff was going on there. The plague, the Nika riots, the wars with the Persians, the wars with the Goths.
And who knows how much that
the
whale
disruption of trade.
Could have disrupted the trade between Asia Minor and...
in reality, who knows? But, it's fun to hypothesize about these kind of things.
This is a big butterfly,
the butterfly effect,
Yeah.
Just like you can talk about like what brought down the actual main, the Roman Empire. Was it the lead in the pipes? Was it the high taxation? Was it the barbarian tribes that they took in?
Yeah.
A lot of these topics are often compared to the modern time and seen as a parallel. Like, okay, well, they point to one thing and they say like, okay, well, we're doing this wrong because they clearly did this wrong.
Yeah. So there's more. It says more about the modern world sometimes when we identify what led to the fall. But like you said, it might have just been this combination of all these things, or a whale.
Yeah, it could be.
But it's interesting also to consider, what does the whale represent of the human psyche? Like back then, it was like this unknown, the scary. What is it now? Is it AI? Is it nuclear war? Is it outer space? Is it aliens from outer space?
Because we tend to think of whales themselves more like in terms of like now helping conservation and making sure that they stay alive instead of like killing them or harvesting them for their oil. But today, the whale, the monster, say AI.
Yeah, if it actually becomes
if it actually becomes a thing.
The ghost in the shell, so to speak.
Yeah. And AI has both positives and negatives in that, just like the whale is seen as like a threat, but also in terms of respect and reverence and awe at its potential, just like we also can
we respect, even, we respect nuclear power immensely. We expect these generative text programs with what they can produce.
I hope they don't turn into like Skynet or
exactly.
Yeah. That's a whole other topic. But
and it certainly could be. And Edward Gibbon, the fall of the Roman Empire, could be another topic of why Rome fell. And but it makes sense if you think about the trade patterns. Like I read somewhere that to go 10 miles inland into Attica or into the Peloponnese would take longer by foot or horse than it would to travel 100 miles.
Yeah, absolutely. Because back then, the seas were actually more of a like a highway of sorts, a connector rather than a barrier, as you might think of them, because it was easier to traverse there.
Right.
I mean, that, like the rivers were also very important, like things like the Vikings and whatnot.
Oh yeah. We were talking about speaking of other cultures that might have interacted with whales. We were talking about the Vikings, and one person who visited the Vikings was Ibn Fadlan, and he traveled from Baghdad during the
height of
Golden
the
Age,
Islamic Caliphate.
and traveled up through the Volga River, or maybe not the Volga. Actually, maybe I think he traveled through the Caucasus. And then went up through Kiev and through the rivers there, and then ended up in witnessing a Viking funeral around Denmark or potentially Sweden. But what's interesting is that was turned into a fictional account, and Michael Crichton, who created Jurassic Park, and he encounters Beowulf.
Interesting, yeah.
And what's fun is he sees Beowulf, he sees a Viking funeral, and he goes back. But the Vikings certainly could have encountered whales. I mean, off Iceland or going to England or even on their way to Finland.
The whole, the journey of Leif Erikson to the New World, which we still kind of celebrate now, Leif Erikson Day. But supposedly they left like a little colony there in Newfoundland, which actually might be the topic of another podcast.
That would be a fantastic podcast.
The whole kind of push from Scandinavia to Iceland to Greenland, and Greenland to Newfoundland, kind of hopping all the way there.
And then also the theories that maybe they went down as far south as New England, even Rhode Island. People say there's like these castle-looking structures.
I've heard of those, and there's a lot of theories as to why those are built, but like...
I don't fully buy them, but it is interesting that people contend that the Vikings could have gone that far south. I guess technologically they potentially could have, but I don't know if the population...
Yeah, those longboats were very... Yeah. They had a distant range, but I'm sure whales could have probably taken some of those down. They weren't that...
There are a lot of whales off the coast
massive,
I mean, Nantucket is where Moby-Dick kind of starts, or at least where the crew is assembled. But Leif Erikson, I mean, his statue is in Reykjavik. Looks very cool. When I saw it back in 2017, but it's interesting to consider how much whales, squids, how much little we know about them. Maybe giant squids attack ships with their massive tentacles. And you could imagine, someone in antiquity would be freaked out by that.
Yeah, of course, they wouldn't have any explanation what this is. I mean, giant squids, they inspired the legend of the Kraken, for example. That was like a well-known thing. And we don't, even to this day, we barely know about the truly giant squid species. Like, we only see them very rarely come out of the deep, and they're usually kind of dead by that time. So
they just beach.
Exactly.
And whales beach.
Of course.
As well.
But even in antiquity, like, whales occupied an interesting place in the kind of mythos of the time.
Right. I imagine people, or at least in ancient Greece, would have considered Poseidon as just sending either a sea monster to attack.
Exactly.
In Homer, there aren't a lot of references to whales.
In the Odyssey,
there's like Scylla and Charybdis. There's a Strait of Messina between Sicily and the boot of Italy, which is the whirlpools that exist there, and then this multi-headed creature that would chop off or eat up Odysseus's crew. But in the what's referenced to have occurred in the Iliad, which isn't in the Iliad, but it's referenced in other Homeric poetry, is that when the Greeks built the Trojan horse, there was a soothsayer who came about and told King Priam, "Don't trust the Greeks because they're lying." He didn't know that troops were in the horse, and King Priam was considering burning the horse, which would have burnt the entire Greek army. But this conversation was happening on the water, and Poseidon sends an octopus or a squid to eat this soothsayer, and that's the beginning of Odysseus' problems, because after he sacks Troy, Odysseus proclaims to the gods, "I am more than immortal. I don't need the gods." And Poseidon says, "Yeah, but you wouldn't have done it without me, because the guy was about to burn your horse." And that's where the whole journey begins. Not a whale, but a sea monster.
But even on the old maps, like, the whales are often depicted in a more monstrous way than they actually
Yes.
are, like almost like they're part, I don't know, dragon or something.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, they didn't really have a very strong understanding of
Even
what
up
these
to the
things are.
1800s, really.
Yeah, exactly. And they didn't know they probably didn't know that they were mammals. Probably thought that giant fish or something like that.
Right.
As we do today. But I try to go whale watching. Last year when I was in Vancouver and Seattle, the boat that we took in between them in Puget Sound was past an area that was supposed to have a lot of whales, but unfortunately we didn't actually catch any firsthand. But
It happens, yeah.
I mean, I've seen them, of course, at things like SeaWorld and things like
Right.
that.
Yeah, it's a different experience.
Same thing. But someday I do want to see a whale in the wild.
Right. See their big fin just come up. You can imagine being on like a ship, even in like the 1800s or late 1700s, just seeing like these big things, and maybe the younger
blows.
Yeah, maybe the younger kids on the crew would try to lie and say, "Hey, I saw a whale's tail," try to get attention or something.
Course, yeah.
You never know. Maybe it didn't work out all the time, but it's interesting to consider returning back to Porphyrios, how much whales we don't know about. We have the secret history. Procopius tells us about this, but how many whales do we not know about that had terrorized or caused problems or just were like a novelty?
Yeah. That's the thing. I mean, there's so many things in history in general that we don't know about that.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
They might have even been written about, but they became lost to history.
Right.
That's been a big thing. Like the Library of Alexandria, of course, had tons of stuff. Who knows? There might have been info
on Porphyrios, or other whales. Yeah.
Maybe aliens. Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah. Maybe the whale was an alien.
Maybe they explained how the pyramids were built.
Maybe Porphyrios built the pyramids. Yeah. I mean, whales have a lot of force and power. They could certainly move those big boulders somehow if they were attached to a harness, maybe.
But I mean,
I don't know if whales could swim up the Nile.
Nah, I don't think
they swim up the Thames, but the Thames makes sense. Yeah. Or the Seine River, that wouldn't make sense either.
From seeing it from like London Bridge, which I think was occupied by a bunch of buildings, all kind of jumbled on there, seeing like a whale below you. That
must have been a really interesting sight. Yeah. It makes me wonder if it would have disturbed the structural foundations, like London Bridge is falling down.
Just kind of
nursery rhyme.
This rickety old structure.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it apparently fascinated the crowd around Shakespeare's time, certainly, and I mean that was around the time they were colonizing the New World.
Pretty much, yeah.
So I imagine whales were part of that story. I mean, you look at I looked at statistics or a map of shipwrecks. I think there's millions of them.
Oh yeah,
throughout history. Yeah, and it makes you wonder how many were caused by whales.
Yeah, that's a good question. Whales versus storms or rocks,
Right. How many Spanish galleons lost?
Yeah, that's the thing. I've always wanted to explore the wreck of a Spanish galleon somewhere in the Caribbean. I actually got to see. I snorkeled over one, I believe.
Really?
In the Bahamas when I was a kid.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Spanish galleons are things of wonder. In 100 Years of Solitude, there's a beached galleon 100 miles inland, and nobody knows how it got there. And it's a source of, it's a subject of fascination and magical realism. I think about that galleon a lot. Speaking of galleons, this is an interesting side note. When the Spanish reached California, they were wondering if it was an island, and in the early 1500s they mapped it out, and it wasn't an island. But you could maybe assume that because of Baja California.
Right, it's a very long peninsula.
Right, and some people assumed it was an island. So for 100 years they didn't think it was an island. They knew it wasn't an island. And then one day this overexcited Jesuit priest goes over there and he wants to promote it, and he draws California as an island. But of course there's a lot of secrecy at times. And one of his maps gets attacked by, I think, Dutch pirates, privateers. And his map is on a Spanish galleon going back to Spain. The galleon is attacked, and they find this
Sneaky
map,
Dutch.
and the Dutch think this is a secret government map of the Spanish monarchy, and California is actually an island, and they've been lying to us all this time. But really, it was this overactive imagination of a Jesuit priest.
Yeah.
It gets back to the Netherlands. It's disseminated over Europe, and there's maps even in Japanese, German, Ottoman, Turkish, English, Dutch, French, all depicting California as an island, like 100 years after they knew it wasn't an island, because they thought it was secret information.
Yeah.
So you see lots of maps of California as an island.
Yeah.
So it just goes to show this naval themes can lead to so much confusion.
I think wasn't the name of California based on like some kind of Khalifa. Like
Yes.
it was. They generated some kind of legend about like this
Yes.
land of like wealth and gold and opportunity and stuff like that.
Yes, yeah.
But yeah, I don't remember the details.
I think you're right, like Princess Khalifa or something.
Yeah, something
yeah,
like that,
yeah.
yeah.
And it's
Try
a
to
lot of
attract
people.
like people.
Right, right, and it is sort of like a mystical island in some sense, but based on its geography. And Sir Francis Drake tried to colonize it.
Someday it might be an island if it eventually, if the San Andreas
Oh
fall.
yes, yes,
in the
yeah, that's
millions
very
of
true.
years or whatever.
The maps will become true. Yeah. Who knows at a certain point, but these nautical themes are fascinating.
Yeah.
And you know what's curious is when we, in our modern world, when we're on the frontier of things, we say we surf the net. And there's so many water themes, nautical themes, aquatic themes that we have for the internet, kind of the frontier of what it stands for.
Absolutely, yeah.
We're astronaut is like not means sailor. Yeah. Like nautical.
Yep.
Yeah, it comes from the Greek, like naftikos.
Yeah.
So it seems like when we're sailing into a new world, metaphorically, it's like we're going into something unknown. And whales are like this interesting analogy or metaphor
Exactly.
of like what to beware for.
The unknown explore. I mean, but the water can also represent the subconscious.
Yes, universal representation from Jungian perspective of the subconscious.
Yeah, exactly.
So maybe that's why in Constantinople with Porphyrios, they were thinking, wow, this is the zeitgeist of our times.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It was a big deal, yeah.
It was a really big deal, yeah.
So I guess why they brutally murdered it when they eventually...
I mean, it's such a valuable...
Yeah, I guess they wanted that trophy.
The oil, the bones, the meat. I mean, there's a lot you could do with all that blubber. And
and those things do live for like a really long time, so
it makes sense. Right?
Probably longer than a lot of people lived back then in those times, especially with like the plague and everything. So
your grandfather told you about this, right? It's still terrorizing. There's something to be said about looking at the water, though. You know, just like kind of calm, like ripples in the water. It really kind of speaks to the soul.
Of course,
yeah. And maybe that's why it's a representation of the subconscious.
I think it's and it's always come back to us as a source of fascination and wonder.
Yeah. Porphyrios is an interesting topic. It's different from like other things that we've talked about.
Sure. But obviously this podcast is about more than just this whale. It's about like, the people who are involved in it and what it means to us and everything else.
It's Constantinople is kind of the center of the world between like the Persians in the east, the Vikings to the north,
that's right,
the Italians to the west. Yeah.
Those like shepherds, whatever, who founded the town of Byzantium like 600 years before Christ could not have known how important that little fishing village would become. But I guess everything changed when Constantine chose it as his capital and changed its course, its destiny. Even today, Istanbul is very.
It's a major city, the largest city in Europe, actually.
Technically,
right? Even bigger than Moscow and Berlin and London. And Paris, by a few million, I think. What do you think is the modern whale of our time?
Like I said, it could be a lot of things. I mean, any kind of I don't know if it would be more technological these days or more
AI.
Yeah, that kind of thing. But we kind of talked about that like
Right.
already in the past. So
And it's interesting how it's passed on from the thing of fear now to the thing that we try to conserve.
yeah.
And maybe that's an archetype of how we overcome fear. We fear it, we attack it, and then we realize, wow, we didn't need to do
We
that.
get to know it, we understand
and
it.
then we want to take care of it.
Yeah, and then we want to like preserve it.
Maybe that's the theme to end on.
And that will, hopefully apply to other problems we have in the future.
Yes,
other whales and in the deep poking out of the ocean.
Maybe that's how we deal with the metaphorical whale problems of our life. It's like
Yeah.
we fight it, and then we realize, oh, we want to protect it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I just want to say thank you again for joining us on this episode.
Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
Please like, comment, and subscribe. But
Comment. If you have any suggestions for other
we're always open to
episodes,
those.
yeah. So,
Thank you very much.
thank you once again.